Stop before you spend that old British 20p coin. What looks like an ordinary 20p piece could actually be a fascinating piece of British history, and in some cases, small details can make a major difference to collectors. Today we are looking at 3 different 20p coins dated 1982, 1983, and 2000. But here is the important part. We are not going to mix their stories together. We are going to examine each coin separately, because each date has its own history, production story, design details, rarity, and collecting interest. So if you have one of these coins in your collection, wallet, drawer, or old coin jar, stay until the end and compare your coin carefully. And remember, an old coin is not automatically a valuable coin. The exact variety, condition, authenticity, and demand all matter. So let's begin with the first coin, the 1982 British 20p. 1982 British 20p. The 1982 British 20p is a very important coin because 1982 was the year this denomination was introduced into British circulation. That makes the 1982 date the starting point of the 20p story. Before the 20p existed, Britain had already gone through decimalization. Decimal currency was introduced in 1971, replacing the complicated old system of pounds, shillings, and pence. But British decimal coinage continued to develop after Decimal Day, and the 20p denomination was introduced later in 1982. The new denomination was designed to be easy to recognize. Instead of being perfectly round like many traditional coins, the 20p had a distinctive 7-sided shape with curved sides. This unusual shape helped people identify the denomination quickly, even when coins were mixed together in a pocket. The standard 20p was made from copper nickel. It weighed approximately 5 grams and measured around 21.4 millimeters in diameter. The 7-sided shape became one of the most recognizable features of British 20p coins. Now look closely at the reverse of the 1982 coin. You will see the crown Tudor rose. The Tudor rose is one of the most recognizable symbols in British heraldry, and its appearance on the coin gives the design a strong connection to British history. The denomination appears as 20p on the regular version. Together with the date, the designer's initials, WG, relate to William Maving Gardner, but there is one extremely important thing you need to check on a 1982 20p. Look at the wording. Some early 1982 20p pieces carried the words new pence rather than 20p. This is one of the most interesting features connected with the first year of the denomination. According to Royal Mint mintage information, the early 1982 issue carrying the original new pence wording had a much smaller mintage than the later 1982 20p issue. The Royal Mint lists 740,115 coins for the early new pence issue, compared with hundreds of millions for the later 1982 issue. This difference is extremely important for collectors. If you have a 1982 coin, do not simply look at the date and stop there. Look at the actual wording. If it says 20p, you have the regular later wording. If it says new pence, you have the much more interesting early version that deserves closer examination. Now turn the 1982 coin over. The obverse shows Queen Elizabeth II. The portrait used on this coin was created by Arnold Mason. Queen Elizabeth II is shown wearing the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, one of the most recognizable features of this portrait. Around the portrait is the traditional inscription used on British coinage. The inscription includes Elizabeth II and the abbreviated royal titles. For collectors, this is important because the 1982 coin belongs to the early period of Queen Elizabeth II's decimal coinage. Now let's talk about the value of the 1982 coin. This is where we need to separate fact from internet hype. A normal circulated 1982 20p is not automatically worth hundreds, thousands, or millions simply because it is an early coin. Most ordinary circulated examples have relatively modest collector value. The real interest comes from the exact version, condition, and any genuine unusual feature. The early new pence version is particularly interesting because its mintage was dramatically smaller than the regular later wording issue. A high-quality example can also attract more attention than a heavily circulated example. Imagine you have 2 1982 20p coins. Both are genuine. Both have the same year. But one has been in circulation for decades, with scratches, marks, worn details, and dull surfaces. The other has been carefully preserved and retains much sharper details. Collectors may value those two coins very differently. This is why condition is so important. You should also watch for genuine mint errors. A real mint error happens during the manufacturing process. It is different from ordinary damage caused after the coin entered circulation. For example, scratches, dents, corrosion, or damage from machines are not automatically valuable mint errors. If your 1982 coin appears to have an unusual feature, compare it with a normal example before assuming it is rare. Do not clean the coin. This is extremely important. Many new collectors find an old coin and try to polish it because they think a shiny coin must be more valuable. That can actually hurt the coin. Cleaning can leave scratches, remove original surfaces, and reduce collector appeal. If you believe your 1982 coin may be unusual, preserve it exactly as you found it. The 1982 20 pence is therefore important for two major reasons. First, it is the first year of the denomination. Second, the early new pence wording creates an important distinction within the 1982 issues. So if you have a 1982 20 pence, check the wording before spending it. Look at the reverse carefully. Look at the condition. Look at the edge. And compare it with known examples. The coin may be completely ordinary, or it may be a more interesting version that deserves further research. But either way, it is a genuine piece of Britain's early decimal history. 1983 British 20 pence. Now we leave the 1982 coin completely and move to the second coin, the 1983 British 20 pence. Everything we discuss from this point is specifically about the 1983 date. The 1983 20 pence belongs to the second year of the denomination's circulating history. By 1983, the 20 pence was no longer a brand new idea. British people had already begun using the denomination in everyday transactions, and the seven-sided coin was becoming familiar. The 1983 coin continued the basic design established for the denomination. It was a copper-nickel coin with the distinctive seven-sided shape. The reverse featured the crowned Tudor rose. The denomination was 20 pence, with the date incorporated into the design. The designer's initials WG can also be found on the reverse. The Tudor rose was not chosen randomly. It is a historic symbol associated with England and the Tudor dynasty, making it a natural choice for British coinage. Now turn the coin over to the obverse. The 1983 20 pence features Queen Elizabeth II. The portrait is again the Arnold machine portrait used during this period of her reign. Queen Elizabeth II is shown wearing the familiar tiara, and the royal inscription surrounds the portrait. This means that the 1983 20 pence has a very recognizable early decimal appearance. But now we come to the question most people want answered. Is the 1983 20 pence rare? The answer depends on exactly which 1983 coin you have. The standard circulating 1983 issue was produced in a large quantity. Catalog sources report a mintage of approximately 158,463 standard circulating examples. That is a very large number. So the ordinary circulated 1983 20 pence should not automatically be treated as an extremely rare coin. However, large mintage does not mean collectors should ignore the coin. Condition can still matter. A coin that survived in excellent condition can be much more attractive to collectors than a heavily worn example. When examining a 1983 coin, look closely at the portrait. The details around the hair, face, tiara, and lettering should be clear if the coin is well preserved. Then inspect the reverse. Look at the Tudor rose. Look at the lettering. Look at the date. Look at the edges. You are looking for anything that appears genuinely different from a normal example. But there is an important warning. Not every unusual-looking coin is an error. Coins spend years moving through circulation. They can be scratched, bent, dented, struck against other objects, exposed to chemicals, or damaged by machines. These post-mint problems are usually not the kind of errors collectors are searching for. A genuine mint error must be connected to the manufacturing process. So if you find something strange on your 1983 coin, don't immediately believe a social media post claiming that it is worth thousands of dollars. Investigate first. Compare the coin with another 1983 20 pence. Check whether the same feature appears on normal examples. Look at photographs from reliable coin references. And if the coin appears genuinely unusual and potentially valuable, consider professional authentication. Another important point is the difference between asking prices and actual selling prices. You might see a 1983 20 pence listed online for an enormous amount of money. That does not mean the coin is actually worth that amount. Anyone can place a high asking price on an item. The real question is whether a buyer actually paid that amount for a comparable coin. For an ordinary circulated 1983 20 pence, the value is generally modest. The coin's main attraction is its age, early place in the history of the denomination, and interest to collectors building date sets. But if your example is exceptionally well preserved, a proof or special issue, or a genuine mint error, its value can be different. This is why you should identify the exact coin before talking about price. The 1983 20 pence is also interesting because it shows how quickly the new denomination became part of normal British life. When people received this coin and change in 1983, they probably did not imagine that decades later, collectors would be examining the same design under magnification. But that is what makes coin collecting fascinating. An ordinary object can become historical. The coin tells us about British currency, the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, the development of decimal money, and the design choices of the Royal Mint. So if you own a 1983 20 pence, do not assume it is a fortune, but do not throw it away either. Check its condition. Check the design. Check the date. Check for genuine unusual features. And if you are collecting British decimal coins by date, the 1983 20 pence is an important piece of the early series. Away from the 1983 coin and focus only on the 2000 British 20 pence. The year 2000 takes us into a very different period of British coinage. By this time, the 20 pence had already been in circulation for almost 2 decades. The denomination was no longer new. Millions of British people were familiar with its distinctive 7-sided shape. But the coin had gone through an important visual change during the years between 1983 and 2000. The most obvious difference is the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. The 2020 pence uses the 4th portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, created by Ian Rank Broadley. This makes the 2000 coin visually different from the 1982 and 1983 examples. If you place a 1982 coin and a 2000 coin side by side, the change in the Queen's portrait is easy to notice. The 2020 pence continues to use the crowned Tudor rose on the reverse, so the coin keeps an important part of its original identity. The 7-sided shape remains. The denomination remains 20 pence. The Tudor rose remains, but the monarch's portrait has changed. This is one of the reasons date collecting can be so interesting. You can watch British coin design evolve simply by putting different years next to each other. Now let's focus specifically on production. The Royal Mint's annual report for 2001 recorded 117 million 20 pence pieces among the United Kingdom's circulating coin issues for that financial year. That tells us something important. The 20 pence was still being produced on a very large scale. Therefore, an ordinary 2020 pence should not automatically be considered rare. Finding one does not mean you have discovered a guaranteed fortune. However, collectors can still search the 2000 coin for interesting varieties, high-grade examples, and genuine minting errors. The 2000 date is also part of a period in which collectors have paid attention to small design differences. For example, catalog information records differences in the shape of the top of the number. In dates around this period, that is the kind of tiny detail that can become interesting to specialists. But again, identification is essential. A design variety is not automatically a major mint error, and a damaged coin is not automatically rare. If your 2000 coin has a strange-looking number, lettering, edge, or portrait, compare it with a normal 2000 example. Use magnification if necessary. Take clear photographs. Look at the coin from different angles. It could have been used in shops, buses, vending machines, parking machines, and countless ordinary transactions. Decades later, those same coins became objects of interest for collectors. Now let's talk about condition. A circulated 2020 pence may have scratches, small marks, and wear. That is normal. But an example that has remained in excellent condition can be more desirable. The difference can be especially noticeable around the Queen's portrait and the details of the Tudor rose. Sharp details usually indicate less wear. However, condition should be judged carefully. A coin that looks shiny is not necessarily better. A polished coin can actually be damaged. Original surfaces are generally preferred by collectors. So if you discover a 2020 pence that looks unusually nice, keep it safe rather than trying to make it shinier. Now let's answer the biggest question. What is a normal 2020 pence worth? For a normal circulated example, generally not a huge amount above its face value. The real premium comes from special circumstances. Those circumstances can include an identified variety, proof issue, exceptional grade, or authenticated mint error. So the date alone does not make the coin valuable. The exact coin does. That is the lesson every collector should remember. The 2020 pence is still worth examining because small details can be interesting. But you should not believe exaggerated claims that every 2020 pence is worth thousands or millions. Check the evidence. Check the exact variety. Check condition. Check real completed sales when possible. And if you believe you have a genuine rare error, get professional advice. The 2020 pence is therefore an interesting later example of the British 20 pence series. It shows how the denomination survived into a new era while retaining its famous seven-sided shape and Tudor rose design. It also gives collectors an opportunity to study the fourth portrait of Queen Elizabeth II and the small design details associated with this period. So if you have a 2020 pence, take a close look before spending it. Final conclusion. We have now examined all three coins separately. The 1982 20 pence is the beginning of the denomination and deserves special attention because of the early new pence wording. The 1983 20 pence belongs to the second year of the denomination and is an important early decimal coin. Although the standard circulating issue was produced in a large quantity, the 2020 pence belongs to a much later period and features the fourth portrait of Queen Elizabeth II by Ian Rank Broadley. Each coin has its own story. Each coin has its own design history. Each coin has its own production history. And each coin should be examined on its own, rather than assuming that one rule applies to all three. The biggest lesson is simple. Do not judge a coin only by its age. Do not judge it only by its date. And definitely do not believe a huge internet price without checking the evidence. Look for the exact variety. Look for genuine mint errors. Look at condition. Look at design details. And always distinguish between an asking price and a real selling price. If you have one of these coins, take a clear photograph of both sides and examine the details carefully. If your 1982 coin says new pence, pay particular attention. If your 1983 coin is unusually well preserved, investigate its condition. And if your 2000 coin has an unusual date or design detail, compare it with known examples before assuming it is an error. Coin collecting is not just about finding a coin worth a huge amount of money. It is about discovering history. A 20 pence coin can tell the story of British decimalization, the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, changing coin portraits, traditional British symbols, and the evolution of everyday money. So the next time you find an old 20 pence coin, don't immediately spend it. Turn it over. Look at the date. Study the design. Check the condition. And ask yourself one simple question. Is this just another 20 pence coin? Or is there something unusual hiding in the details? Because sometimes the most interesting part of a coin is not what you see from far away. It is the tiny detail you only notice when you look closely.